The evening rain came down soft and steady against the tall glass windows of Morty's, blurring the city lights into long gold streaks across the wet pavement outside. Inside, the restaurant hummed the way only a five-star establishment can: low music, crystal glasses catching candlelight, the quiet theater of people performing wealth for one another. And at table 9, in the far left corner near the service corridor, a man sat alone who looked like he had no business being there at all. Alessandro Morty was wearing a suit he had not pressed on purpose. The tie had a faint stain near the knot that he had dabbed there himself with the edge of a dinner napkin at his hotel that afternoon. His watch was a drugstore find, $12.40, analog face, scratched plastic. His hair, normally cut with the kind of precision that costs $300 in silence, had been pushed back carelessly with dry hands. He looked like a man who had maybe gotten dressed in the dark. A widower, perhaps, eating alone because the house was too quiet. Nobody worth looking at twice. That was exactly the point. He had done this before, walked into one of his own properties unseen, sat in a corner and watched. Not the food, not the presentation, not the profit margins his finance team would send him in a Monday morning email. He watched the people, the ones clocking double shifts in rubber-soled shoes, the ones whose smiles were plastered on so tight you could see the effort in their jaw. The ones who made the whole beautiful machine run, while the wealthy diners above them never once asked their names. Alessandro had built the Morty Group across 22 years, from a single trattoria in Chicago's West Side to a collection of properties that stretched across 8 cities. Food critics wrote breathless reviews. Travel magazines put his restaurants on their best of lists. His name meant something in rooms he once would never have been allowed to enter. But tonight, he was not there for any of that. He was there because of his mother. Rosa Morty had been a laundress. She had worked 6 days a week in a building that smelled of bleach and steam, pressing other people's tablecloths, other people's shirts, other people's linens, so that Alessandro could have lunch money and a warm coat in winter. She never complained. She never asked for anything. She carried everything alone because that was what she believed she was supposed to do. And one February morning, when Alessandro was 19 years old, she sat down in her chair after a long shift and never got back up. A stroke, the doctors said. From exhaustion, he had always believed. She was 51 years old. He had carried that grief quietly for decades. And somewhere inside it, like a stone at the bottom of a river, lived a question he had never fully answered. Had he built something she would have been proud of? Or had he built something that would have ground a woman like her to dust? That was why he came to sit at table 9. Not to taste the risotto, not to review the service, but to find out, honestly and plainly, what kind of world he had created for the people who kept its lights on. He lifted his wine glass and let his eyes move slowly across the floor. The dinner rush was in full swing. Servers moved with the practiced ease of people who had learned to carry a great deal without showing it. He watched a young man refill a water glass with his left hand while balancing a tray on his right, never breaking stride. He watched a hostess absorb a sharp remark from a table of 4 with a smile, so rehearsed it had no feeling left in it at all. And then he saw her. She was working the section just east of the bar, maybe 3 tables from where he sat. Young, perhaps mid-20s, with dark hair pinned back under a white clip and a posture that was straight in a way that looked earned rather than trained. She moved efficiently, purposefully, the way someone moves when they are not performing grace, but actually possess it. She set a bread basket down without being asked. She noticed a nearly empty glass before the guest looked up. She was good at this. Genuinely good. But Alessandro had watched enough people under pressure to recognize when someone was carrying something extra. And this young woman was carrying something she was trying very hard not to show. Every few minutes, her eyes cut to the hallway beside the kitchen. Not obviously. Not in a way that any diner would catch. But Alessandro caught it. That quick, involuntary glance toward the back of the house, like a thread pulling at her from somewhere she was not allowed to go. He watched her do it 4 times in 11 minutes. On the 5th time, the hallway door swung open. The man who came through it walked like someone who believed the room owed him space. Enzo Caruso, the head manager, was dressed in a pressed black suit and carried a clipboard that he used less for information and more for authority. Alessandro had hired him 2 years ago on the recommendation of his operations director. Strong numbers, clean reviews, tight control over costs. On paper, he was exactly what a property like this needed. Alessandro watched him cross the floor toward the young woman. watched Enzo's hand close around her elbow, not roughly, but with the kind of grip that says, "I am in charge of you." He said something close to her ear. Her face did not change, but her body went rigid in the way a body does when it is bracing. She said something back. Low, controlled. A plea dressed up as professionalism. Enzo's jaw tightened. He turned her toward the service corridor and guided her through the door with the kind of force that looks like direction but feels like a shove. Behind them, through the door that swung half open before it closed, Alessandro heard it, a child's cough. Small, dry, and tired. He set his wine glass down on the table slowly and did not pick it up again. The door to the service corridor swung open and the dining room changed. It did not change loudly. There was no crash, no raised voice, no moment where the music stopped. It changed the way a room changes when something wrong walks into it, a slow, creeping shift in the air that most people feel but cannot name. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Conversations dropped half a syllable. Eyes moved without meaning to. Enzo came through the door first, and behind him came Bianca. She was holding a child. The boy was small, maybe 9 years old, wrapped in the lower half of Bianca's server apron like a makeshift blanket. His head rested against her shoulder, and his eyes were glassy, half open in the way that sick children's eyes get when the fever has been running long enough to take the fight out of them. His hair was damp. His lips were dry. One of his small hands gripped the fabric of Bianca's collar with the quiet desperation of a child who only feels safe when he is touching the one person he trusts. Bianca's face was stone. Whatever she was feeling was buried under so many layers of control that only her eyes gave her away. They were scanning the room quickly, not out of embarrassment, but out of protection. She was assessing, calculating exits. She had done this before, walked through public spaces with this boy, drawing stares, and she had learned to get through it by looking at nothing too long. Enzo, on the other hand, was performing. He walked 2 steps ahead of her, spine straight, voice already rising to a volume that had no practical purpose other than to make sure the room heard him. "Policy is policy," he announced to no one and everyone. "Sanitation violation. Non-staff persons are prohibited in back-of-house areas. There are no exceptions." A woman at the table nearest the corridor looked up. A couple near the window turned. The maitre d' at the host stand went very still. Bianca said nothing. She kept her eyes forward and her arms tight around Luca, and she walked toward the front entrance with her chin up in the way that people walk when they are holding themselves together through pure will and nothing else. Alessandro was already on his feet. He did not hurry. He did not raise his voice. He crossed the dining floor with the calm, unhurried stride of a man who has never once needed to rush to be heard, and he stepped directly into their path near the edge of the bar. He looked at the boy first. "Does he need water?" Bianca stopped. She looked at Alessandro the way you look at a stranger who has just said something completely unexpected, guarded, searching, trying to understand the angle. He did not look like someone important. He looked like someone's forgettable uncle who had wandered in from the parking lot. Enzo said, stepping forward, "This is a private staff matter. I'll need to ask you to return to your—" "I heard you the first time," Alessandro said, still looking at the boy. "I am asking if the child needs water." There was a pause. Bianca swallowed. "Yes," she said quietly. "He does." Alessandro turned and found the sommelier at the nearest station with a single look. The sommelier, a man named Giordano who had worked Morty Properties for 11 years, moved immediately toward the bar without being told anything more. Enzo's voice sharpened. "Sir, I need you to step back. You are interrupting a personnel matter, and I will have to involve security if—" Alessandro reached into the inside pocket of his rumpled jacket and placed his card on the bar top beside Giordano's tray. It was matte black titanium, no logo visible at standard glance, with a single raised initial embossed at the center. The kind of card that does not need a bank name on it, because the people who recognize it already know exactly what it means. Giordano looked down at it. The color left his face so fast it was almost startling. He looked up at Alessandro, then back down at the card, and something behind his eyes went very, very quiet. Enzo had not seen it yet. He was still talking. Alessandro was no longer listening to him. He stepped back from the bar and moved down the short hallway beside the kitchen entrance. He needed 30 seconds and a person willing to tell the truth. He found both in a junior server named Petra, 19 years old, who had been frozen near the linen rack since Enzo walked through the door. Her hands were shaking. She had the look of someone who had been carrying a secret that was too heavy for her and had been waiting, without realizing it, for someone to come ask for it. Alessandro did not crowd her. He stood at a distance and spoke low. "What actually happened last night?" Petra looked over her shoulder. She looked at his face. Something in its steadiness convinced her. She told him that after closing the previous evening, she had been restocking near the hallway when she heard Enzo stop Bianca outside the break room door. She told him what Enzo had said, that if Bianca had just been nicer to him the night before, the boy could have stayed. She told him that Bianca had said nothing back, that she had just picked up her bag, kept her eyes down, and gone back to work for the last 2 hours of her shift without a word. Alessandro thanked her. He stood in that hallway for a moment with his back against the wall and let what she had told him settle. Then he pulled up the employee records on his phone. He had access to every Morty property database from a single application his IT team had built 5 years ago. He found Bianca Volp's file in under a minute. He read it in under 2, former medical student. 3rd year completed. Academic record that made the screen feel like it was glowing. Parents had lost their home and everything in it to a fire 14 months ago. Bianca had withdrawn from her program 6 weeks before her final exams. Reason listed: family circumstances. She had not quit because she gave up. She had quit because there was a 9-year-old boy who had nobody else. Alessandro put his phone back in his pocket and walked back into the dining room. Enzo was on his radio, calling for the front security staff. Bianca stood near the entrance with Luca still in her arms, and she was not moving toward the door. She was standing her ground with everything she had left, which was not much, but it was everything. Luca had pressed his face into her neck, and his small shoulders were rising and falling with the shallow, uneven breathing of a child whose body was working too hard. Alessandro stopped in the center of the dining room floor. He did not raise his hand. He did not clear his throat. He simply stood still in the middle of all that expensive silence and spoke in a voice that was quiet enough that every person in that room had to stop what they were doing to hear it. "Nobody is leaving," he said. "But before this evening is over, someone in this room is going to be fired. And it is not going to be her." The dining room had gone completely still, not the polite, performative quiet that falls over expensive restaurants between courses. This was a different kind of silence. The kind that has weight to it. The kind that presses down on a room when everyone in it realizes, at the same moment, that something real is happening. Something that no amount of money or reputation can smooth over or redirect. Every eye in Morty's was on Alessandro. He stood in the center of the floor in his rumpled suit and his cheap watch, and he did not rush. He looked around the room slowly, the way a man looks around a space he built from nothing and has never stopped loving, even when it disappointed him. Then he looked at Enzo. Enzo had gone the color of old ash. The radio in his hand had dropped to his side. The performance was over, and somewhere behind his eyes, the math was happening: who this man was, what that card meant, how badly he had miscalculated the cost of this particular evening. Alessandro spoke clearly, without cruelty and without theater. He told the room who he was, not to humiliate, not to make a scene, but because the truth had a right to be spoken in the same space where the lie had been performed. He said he owned the building they were sitting in, the kitchen behind those doors, the glasses in their hands. He said he had come in tonight without a name tag or an introduction because he had learned long ago that the only way to know what something truly is, you have to see it when it thinks nobody important is watching. He said that what he had seen tonight had broken something in him, and that he intended to fix it. He turned back to Enzo. There are moments in a person's life when every door closes at once, when there is nowhere left to go and nothing left to hide behind. Enzo Caruso was standing in the middle of one of those moments, and every person in that room could see it on him. Alessandro did not shout. He did not list the charges like a courtroom attorney building a case. He simply told Enzo that he knew what had been said in the hallway the previous evening, that he had spoken to the person who heard it, and that there was no version of what had happened here tonight that was about sanitation or policy or professional standards. He said that what it was about was power, the small, ugly kind that some men reach for when they realize they cannot get what they want any other way. He told Enzo he was finished. Then he said the one other thing that needed to be said. "Before you go," Alessandro told him, "you are going to apologize to her, not for firing her, for what you said in that hallway." Enzo opened his mouth, closed it, looked around the room for an ally and found none. Petra, the junior server, was standing near the kitchen entrance with her hands clasped in front of her and her chin lifted. The maitre d' had stepped away from the host stand and was looking at the floor. Giordano, the sommelier, stood near the bar with his arms at his sides and said nothing. The room waited. Whatever Enzo Caruso had been before that night, whatever authority he had built, whatever room he had commanded, it was gone. He crossed the floor to where Bianca stood near the entrance, still holding Luca, and he said the words. They were not graceful words. They were not enough words. But they were said out loud in front of the people who needed to hear them, and when they were finished, Enzo walked to the door and did not look back. Bianca watched him go. She did not say anything. She did not need to. Alessandro was already on his phone. His personal physician, a man named Dr. Ferrara who had been on his contact list for 9 years and answered on the second ring no matter the hour, was given a single set of instructions. A car was arranged. A private clinic on the north side of the city, the kind with a children's ward that smelled like warm linen instead of disinfectant, was expecting them within the hour. Bianca looked at Alessandro when he told her. Her arms tightened around Luca for just a moment, that instinctive pull of a person who has been doing everything alone for so long that an outstretched hand feels more like a threat than a gift. I am not asking you to trust me tonight, Alessandro said quietly. I am asking you to let the boy rest somewhere warm. That is all. She looked at Luca, at the damp hair against his forehead, at the dry lips and the shallow breathing and the exhausted weight of him in her arms. She had carried him this far on love and stubbornness and very little else, and she was tired. Deeply, honestly tired in the way that only people who have been strong for too long ever get. She nodded. The car came. Luca was lifted gently from her arms by a paramedic who spoke to him softly, who called him buddy, who tucked a warm blanket around him without making it feel clinical or cold. Bianca climbed in beside him and held his hand for the entire ride. Alessandro arranged everything else from the restaurant floor over the next 40 minutes. Foundation paperwork that his legal team had been sitting on for 2 years. A program designed to ensure that no Morty employee would ever have to choose between their family and their paycheck, was pulled from draft and marked for immediate filing. A full scholarship to complete her medical degree, a stipend for Luca's ongoing care, and a consultancy role waiting for her at the foundation when she was ready. Not charity, a correction. When the last car had gone and the dining room had emptied and the staff had drifted back into the quiet work of closing, Alessandro returned to table 9. He sat down. The wine was long gone. The candle had burned low. Outside, the rain was still falling, softer now, tracing slow lines down the tall glass windows like the city itself was letting something go. He picked up the cheap watch from his wrist and set it on the table in front of him. He looked at it for a long moment. $12.40. Scratched plastic face. It had done its job. He thought about Rosa, about her cracked hands and her early mornings and the way she had never once asked the world to be kinder to her. He thought about what it would mean to her, not the foundation, not the headlines that would follow, not the press release his communications team would draft by morning. Just this. One woman safe, one child warm, one man choosing when it counted to be worth something. He had come tonight with a question he could not answer from a boardroom or a balance sheet. He had needed to see it for himself, feel it in an unguarded moment, know it the way his mother had always known things, not from reports, but from the gut. He sat alone at table 9 for a long time after everyone had gone, in his rumpled suit and his stained tie, and for the first time in longer than he could honestly remember, the answer was clear. He had not lost himself. Not yet. And tonight, he had made